Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Sunday, February 26th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 188 days, the game against Michigan in 272 days. That Indiana game is going to be a little bit of a milestone in the state of Ohio. It will be the first time that an Ohio State football game can be legally bet on in the state of Ohio. Did I say the first time anyone has ever bet on Ohio State football within the state of Ohio? No, I did not. I said legally bet on in the state of Ohio. You may have seen commercials here and there about that. But it is going to be quite a very different season. Ohio State missed by about 3 minutes, having maybe not even 3 minutes, maybe about 30 seconds, having a football game played in the year 2023 after sports betting went into effect in Ohio. And now it is going to be in effect for real this fall. We're going to be talking about some of the early lines that just came out. FanDuel just released some early lines on some notable games, including 3 involving the Buckeyes. And when I think sports betting, I think Marc Givler of BuckeyeHuddle.com. He has done sports betting podcasts in the past, and that is always a very active part of those threads on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Mark, let's talk about the 3 Ohio State games that are out already on FanDuel. I'm going to give you the opening lines. Ohio State minus 7.5 at Notre Dame. That one is actually already up to 8.5, I saw. So the line already moving on that one. Ohio State a 7-point favorite against Penn State. But Mark, Michigan, a 1-point favorite against Ohio State in Ann Arbor. I probably don't need to ask you which of those jumps out to you the most.
Yeah, it's the Michigan line, and maybe it shouldn't. They've lost 2 years in a row by multiple scores, so maybe it shouldn't. But going into this offseason, going into next season, it's a game they have to win. It's a game that it's one of those you almost have to see them lose 3 in a row to Michigan to believe it. The way this rivalry has been the last quarter century almost, and if you have faith that Ryan Day isn't going to let this continue, that's a juicy line, and I think it's already I think it's +2 now. I think I saw it go to +2, so I'm not sure. Boy, that's going to be something. But there was a good point made on our board that Michigan's schedule is so light in the non-conference and leading up to that game that line may not. I think natural instinct is that line could actually move because the last time Ohio State was a dog in that game, I can't even remember. And so I think there's a natural instinct that the line's going to move maybe towards Ohio State being a small favorite, but it may not, because Michigan does not have a lot of roadblocks between now and then. They may come into that game, 11-0, 10-1, and if Ohio State stumbles, and they've got 3 or 4 tough games there before Michigan, if they stumble in one, it may not move the way we think it's going to move. But yeah, if you like Ryan Day and the Buckeyes to stop the losing streak here, that's good value.
Pretty sure the last time they were an underdog in that game was 2018. Which, if this one turns out the way that one turned out, Ohio State fans would be pretty happy with that. But yeah, it does feel like you can play the I'll believe it when I see it on either side, which is I'll believe it when I see it that this Ohio State team beats Michigan again for the first time since 2019. How crazy is that? Or I'll believe it when I see it that this Ohio State team is really going to lose 3 in a row to Michigan, because it is This is a Michigan team that's returning a lot of talent, though. There's that's going to be a real good offensive line again. They've got Corum and Edwards back at running back. They've got McCarthy back. They've got most of their wide receivers back. They've got a decent chunk of the defense back. So it's going to be a pretty good Ohio State team, a pretty good Michigan team. I think Bill Connelly, SP Plus, has Ohio State number 2 in the country and Michigan number 3. So they are projected to be among the best in the country, both of them. Notre Dame not projected in the top 4. And that is why they are going to be a 7.5 or now apparently 8.5 point home underdog to an Ohio State team that's got a bunch of talent back, but you're breaking in a new quarterback. The offensive line is kind of just a big shrug emoji right now. And, is that number a little higher than you were expecting?
Yeah, that's a lot of points for me. That's probably not a spot that I would be super comfortable betting Ohio State in at that point. I think they're better than Notre Dame. I think they're certainly more talented than Notre Dame, but tough road environment. Early in the season, I think, again, if that game's played in, late October instead of September, maybe I have a different feel for that at that point. But you're asking the new quarterback, whoever it is, to kind of hit the ground running in that type of environment, and you're asking a kind of a rebuilt offensive line to have gelled pretty quickly. So that to me is the one where I'm like, that's too much. I don't know that I love Ohio State in that spot. But that being said, that's also one of those games where I could see that moving drastically based on the first couple weeks of the season. Not that Indiana is a world beater or anything like that, but if Ohio State comes out in that opening road environment against Indiana the first week of the season, and if it's McCord or Brown or whoever, throws for 350 yards and the offensive line's blowing people off the ball, and Ohio State wins by 4 or 5 touchdowns, that may make you revisit, like, oh, okay, yeah, wow, this is going to be good right from the get-go, and you may find value there on the other side of things if it's a struggle. And we've kind of seen Ohio State be clunky coming out of the gate. I mean, Indiana a few years ago in a similar spot, and Minnesota a few years ago in a similar spot, they were kind of clunky, and you're going to be wanting, I think, to take those 8.5, 9 points, whatever it's going to be, from the Notre Dame side of things. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how quickly this comes together for that Notre Dame game. I mean, the other games we're going to talk about that we've talked about, we're going to have like almost a full season of data at that point. Those will be easier calls to make.
Yeah, and the other thing that's going to be a little different about Notre Dame is you remember the Notre Dame team that came into the Horseshoe last year, and it was Tyler Buckner and Drew Pines the backup, and they really don't have much of a passing game. They had the one big play right off the start, and then that was kind of it for the most part for the whole game. They have Sam Hartman now. Sam Hartman, who was a very, very effective and very explosive quarterback at Wake Forest, he is now going to be at Notre Dame. This is going to be a little bit of a different Notre Dame offense, maybe a little bit more threatening Notre Dame offense. So we'll see how Jim Knowles and the defense responds to that and what that Notre Dame offense looks like the first few weeks. If Notre Dame is putting up 45 points the first couple weeks with whoever they're playing beforehand, I now don't remember, but you're putting up 45, 50 points those first couple weeks, that might impact that line as well, especially if Ohio State's looking a little clunky. So the last Ohio State line that is out is the Buckeyes, a 7-point favorite against Penn State. And I did a couple shows a few weeks ago because I'm kind of buying in on Penn State this year. It feels like Penn State, this is year when Penn State might push past at least one of the two of Ohio State and Michigan. They are certainly a top 10 caliber team, it feels like this year. And they're another team that's replacing their quarterback, but they've got a lot of other guys back. They maybe have fixed the offensive line issues that have been kind of dogging them for basically a decade now. They don't really win in Columbus very often, and they really haven't won in this series very often. But it's also a team that has, over the years, made things pretty difficult on the Buckeyes, whether it's in Happy Valley or Columbus.
Yeah, that line was kind of right on the money for me, so I don't know. Either way, I mean, can you buy it down to 6.5 and take Ohio State? Maybe would be something to consider if you're going to play it early. But I'm with you. I think, and hopefully for all of our listeners, it's not at Ohio State's expense, but I feel like Penn State's going to finish in the top 2 in the East, and they get Michigan at home, so maybe that'll kind of be. I think a big one there for Penn State in terms of can they actually, can they break through in the East? But they have a lot of interesting pieces. Really like Drew Aller, have for since he's basically a junior in high school, and I thought last year was perfect for him. I know there were fans especially of Penn State, who kind of wanted him to take over and be the starting quarterback, and by October of last year, but I thought that played out well. I thought he was able to get a lot of meaningful reps without being kind of thrown to the wolves. And so I think that's going to pay dividends for them this year. Nick Singleton's a stud. Ohio State recruited him at running back. They've got a couple excellent backs. The offensive line looks better. They've got some playmakers on defense. Just talking about Abdul Carter with someone yesterday, and he camped at Ohio State. I think that, who knows? He probably ends up at Penn State anyway, but I think Ohio State would like a mulligan on that decision to not offer him at camp a couple summers ago. So they've got some difference makers. I think they're faster and more athletic than Michigan. But they've got to prove it. Last year was interesting. They basically beat everyone they should have beaten and lost to the two best teams they played. So it was really hard to, were they overrated or underrated? It was kind of one of those weird debates with the rankings last year because of kind of how their schedule played out, where Michigan blew them out and Ohio State almost gave it away there at the end, but was leading most of that game. And then they had these 10 kind of inconsequential wins, nothing really significant there. So they've kind of been a hard team to value. But I'm with you. I'm a buyer of Penn State going into the season. And I think I would like that line to come down just a little bit if I'm going to bet Ohio State. And if it got, if it went the other direction and you start getting up to 8 or 9, I think I'm probably going Penn State at that point. So that's one I would probably lay off right now. So to kind of summarize, I would kind of like the Ohio State +2 or the Ohio State money line at Michigan. Right now, I would default towards maybe taking some points with Notre Dame, and then with Penn State, I'm like, I think I would take a pass on that and kind of let's see if it goes to 6 or if it goes to 9 or 8 or whatever it does. And like I said, if it moves down, and you can get 6.5, 6. I would probably go Ohio State there.
Yeah, what the reason he's talking about that, just since sports betting is new in Ohio, and people may be doing this for the first time, we talk about key numbers when you're talking about sports betting, and 3, 7, being favored by 3. Think about how many games have been won on a field goal with the score tied. So then if you get that at 2.5 and they kick a field goal to win the game, you win the bet. If it's 3.5, you still lose the bet. So 3, 7, those are kind of key numbers that you gotta, moving a half point can make a big difference in your likelihood of winning. So that's why he's talking about that. There are a bunch of other games out there. I pulled a few that I thought were kind of notable games, and I'll just read through a list real quick, and you can give me one or two that you think jump out at you, because there's one that jumps out at me quite a bit already. Florida State -1 versus LSU. Remember that game came down to a missed PAT last year, so that was a 1-point Florida State win last year in the Superdome. Florida State favored by 1 in Tallahassee this year. Texas +8.5 at Alabama. Texas A&M -4 at Miami in what you dubbed the NIL Bowl. Washington -4.5 at Michigan State. Clemson -3 against Florida State. Texas giving 3.5 against Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout. Georgia giving 17.5 against Florida in the cocktail party. Alabama -7.5 against LSU. Georgia -7 in Knoxville at Tennessee. Mark, are there any of those? My voice may have sounded like the Georgia-Florida line was my answer there. It is not, but it's just, that's a big number. Are there any of those that kind of jump out to you as, potential opportunities, let's say, in the early going here?
I like LSU +7.5 at Alabama. I thought LSU, and I was kind of weird on the Brian Kelly hire. Doesn't seem like much of a fit to me, but they played really well at the end of the year last year. They've got some pieces back. Year 2 in the system, the offense should be even better. I need to see Alabama. We kind of talked about this with like the Ohio State Notre Dame game, like how these two teams with some different quarterbacks and things are going to come out of the gates, and kind of how that could affect the line or kind of your view of those teams. And that's kind of where I'm at on Alabama. Who's going to win their quarterback position? It sounds like Ty Simpson is the guy who's got the inside track. They've got some real dudes to replace on defense. I thought they struggled last year at some of the playmaking positions, wide receiver especially. Is that going to be substantially better this year? And especially with a young quarterback, is that going to be better? So I like LSU there. I also kind of like Texas there too. I think if you can get a big number, if you can get some points at a big number against Alabama, especially probably first half of the season, like with Texas, I gotta kind of see it with them first, because I was not a big Alabama guy last year. It never looked great to me, and now they're losing Bryce Young and Will Anderson and all these big name guys. And I'm just like, I know they've recruited incredibly well, but that could take some time to hit full stride. So those were two. And then the conundrum with Georgia is going to be, can they stay hungry? I mean, they're 2-time national champs now. They haven't lost in a million years. But on paper, I think they should cover that Tennessee line. They're -7 at Tennessee. I don't think Tennessee was a flash in the pan, but I don't know that they're going to be able to replicate last year. And that was a non-competitive game they played against Georgia. And here's the scary thing, I think, for the rest of the country that probably no one on this channel wants to hear is Georgia was kind of a year ahead of schedule last year. I know they're going to have a new quarterback, but the rest of that team, look, there's a couple of key losses. I'm not going to completely overshadow those, but this was largely a young team that Georgia had that was largely considered, this could be a transition year, and then this was going to, so this is going to be their year apparently. And so I think if you can get Georgia in similar spots where you can get them a touchdown or less on some of these other games, I think Georgia is going to be, if they can not be their own worst enemy, with motivation and things like that, I think Georgia could be a monster this year.
That's really interesting because I think you go back through the last 3 Ohio State national champions, they were all kind of a year early, a little like Georgia was last year, where yes, they won in 2014, but man, have you seen the 2015 Buckeyes? And yes, they won in 2002, but man, they're bringing everyone back in 2003 and even 1968. It was the super softs. Well, they're sophomores, so certainly they'll get better as juniors, and then sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And so, yeah, that's going to be an interesting one in terms of them staying hungry. All right, I need you to talk me out of something, Mark. Okay. Washington and Michael Penix giving only 4.5 points against a Michigan State program that I'm not completely ready to throw in the towel, but I am going to need to see something from Michigan State. I think if you ask the average person, how many games did Washington win last year? You would get about 8, maybe 9. They were 11-2 last year. They beat Texas in the Alamo Bowl. They were a really, really good team for most part during the course of the season. Talk me out of giving 4.5 points with Washington going to Michigan State.
Well, I'm not going to talk you out of it, but what I'm going to have to talk you into is you're probably going to need to get that money in, because I swear I saw that at I saw it came out at 4.5. I think it might be up to 6. So you may want to get your money in before it's 8. That jumped significantly, I think, from when it was released. So you may just want to hurry. I'm not going to talk you. I'm going to talk you into getting your money in there quickly if you want 4.5. Maybe you can still get 4.5, 5 somewhere. Yeah, that was an interesting one to me. Now, didn't Michigan State? Now they played them out in Washington last year, and wasn't it
it ended up 39-27 or 38-27 or something like that. It was like a 10-ish point game.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, historically, the only devil's advocate thing I would say here is historically, it'd be very on brand for Michigan State to make a statement and win that game, then lose 5 games in the Big Ten. I mean, that would be pretty on brand for what they've done historically in certain seasons where they come out of the gates and it's oh my gosh, and then kind of fizzles. But yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me at face value. Washington should be pretty good. They got some good receivers back. They should be pretty tough. Just that cross country flight road game. Do you know what time is it? Have they released times? Is it a night game or probably going to be a night game?
I was just about to look up who else is playing that week, because if that's a big noon kickoff and it's a Pac-12 team going east and playing a 9 a.m. body clock game, I mean, we all saw the Oregon-Ohio State game that was a noon game a couple of years ago, so it's not like it can't be done, but it is a little bit more of a hurdle to overcome. So, yeah, one more thing that I'll have to look up before I do anything too rash, but that did jump out to me a little bit. And this is going to end up being something that we are probably going to be talking about a little bit more this year, now that this is something that is, a way that a lot of people are going to be experiencing the sport this year, perhaps for the first time, or, in a more meaningful way. where it's not just, oh, I'm driving past Wheeling Island, I'll stop and throw a couple bucks down on something and then cash my winning ticket as I'm coming back or whatever. So yeah, we'll maybe be talking a little bit more sports betting at various points this year. If this is something you guys want to hear more about, let us know in the comments. We will, or message us on Twitter or on the huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. As I have said before, we're not here to hear ourselves talk. We're here to talk about whatever you guys want to hear us talk about. So if you want to hear more sports betting talk, let us know. We'll do some more shows on this kind of stuff. If you want to hear something else, let us know that too. It is a long off season. We got plenty of time to talk about whatever you guys want to hear about. And we can talk about that here. We can talk about that on the huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com, which is exclusive to our members, full of great content. Alex and Mark covering the recruiting beat. Tony, Kevin, and I on team coverage. Our fantastic team of scheme guys and X's and O's gurus making you a smarter football fan. It is all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.